Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I want to correct an error that I made in previous videos in the code and that I've only just noticed. And the error is to do with starting or changing over the attack when one side has finished their attack and changing it over to the other. Now you'll notice that, or you may remember that, I'll zoom in a little bit, when we start the game, when we initialize, we set $CA, which stands for current attacker, to 1, meaning that it's sort of character number 1 out of the currently attacking side. That is the next one to have a go. And I have a little note here that says would have to change this if can start a combat with a dead PC or player character. In some games that I've played, it's a little bit unrealistic, but when a character dies, you can sort of carry them around. They're still in your party roster. And the point of that is if you have magic that allows you to sort of resurrect people, which is often the case because it is the case in Dungeons and Dragons, and that's where a lot of these games sort of ultimately come from. So you can carry around dead characters until you can get to a temple, and then you might be able to, pay and have them revived. But I didn't want to do that, so I just assumed that wouldn't happen, and I just put a note to myself if I ever have that as an option, then I would need to change it. And in the combat, so you can never start the combat with a dead player character, but in during the combat, when you're changing over from one side to the other, we have this code where if $CA is over $E, which means if the current attacker, having been increased, is higher than the number of enemies, well, and $AT is equal to 1, which means if the monsters are attacking, but the current attacker number is higher than the number of enemies, then that means we've run out of enemies and we need to change the side that's attacking. So we set $AT to 0 for attacker, we set $DE to 1, and what we used to do was we would set CA to 1, and this didn't used to be here. So I've replaced set CA equals 1 with an include, which goes to this new page. The trouble with setting CA to 1 is, what if attacker number 1 is dead? Because of course they might have died during the combat. And similarly, we have the equivalent code for the other side, where we might set $AT to 1 and DE to 0, and again, instead of this include find first attacker, we would have set CA to 1. And again, that monster might be dead, so it obviously shouldn't get an attack. And I didn't notice that this was the case because I had, by chance, given the first player character a high armor class and a high hit points, so they generally survived in all the examples that I did. And I usually wasn't targeting the first monster, I was usually targeting the 5th or 6th one, because I knew that I'd set that one up to attack the character with the lowest. The 5th and 6th monsters are set up to attack the character with the lowest hit points and the lowest armor class. I can't remember which one does which, but even though it was an example, I was sort of acting a little bit tactically and targeting them. So I generally wouldn't try and kill the first monster. So this case didn't come up. I just sort of realised it when I was looking at the code. So what we do instead is, instead of having set CA equals 1, we have this new page called Find First Attacker, and we include it where we would have had the command to set CA to 1. So let's have a look at what that does. Well, Find First Attacker is very simple. It's just set $CA equal to 0 and then include first 2, which is the next page. I could, of course, have set CA equal to 0 in before these two calls, and that would have made this page unnecessary. I would have just been able to go straight to what is now first 2. But I wanted to have as little stuff. If when I add to the game, I add new calls to this Find First Attacker, I don't want to have to remember that I also have to set a particular variable to 0. So it's better to, if you're going to have a page that's included, and if that requires particular variables to be set up and they're always set up in the same way, it's better to have that set up, I think, it's better to have that set up in the page itself, because then you don't need to remember to do it every time. So I decided, in this particular case, because it's fairly simple, it wouldn't matter, but as a general principle, that's what I think is sort of better practice. So we set $CA equal to 0, and then we include first 2, which is the next new page. First 2 set $CA++. So initially, because it was set to 0, it'll be set to 1. And then if $H, $AT, $CA is less than 1, in other words, if the current hit points of the of that particular character is less than 1, then we include first 2 again. In other words, we effectively go back to the top of the page and we increment again. So look for the next one, in other words. And that way, if character number 1 of either the monsters or the player characters has died, then it will go to number 2 or to number 3 if number 2 is dead, and so on. So I'm sorry about that. I made a little mistake. That's probably the result of insufficient testing, or not so much insufficient testing as I didn't change things around. I mean, I have run several combats with this, but I think what I should have done was muck around with the starting values. At the moment, I've got, where's H? Sorry, oh, here we go. Yeah, right. So at the moment, I've got, so I think it was something like, I think his starting hit points were 12, and I think his starting armor class, I think, was 13. So I lowered both of those so I could test that it worked. And yes, it does work. If he dies, then it does go straight to the next character. But what I should have done was I should have mucked around. I should have said, all right, well, it works with 13, 10, 7, 10. Let's try it with sort of 2, 2, 2, 2. Let's give everyone low hit points, see what that does. Let's give everyone high hit points. Let's change the values around and make sure that it doesn't break. But I neglected to do that, and as a result, I had an error that I didn't detect for quite a while. So I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.